Insulation is a lot less important for soundproofing than you might think. To better understand this, we need to go back to basics and remember that soundproofing isn't real, not in the pure sense of the word. What we mean when we say soundproofing is trying to attenuate sound, or reduce the amount of sound passing from one place to another. Let's take another look at the comparison of wall designs from Gervais' book, Home Recording Studio, Build It Like the Pros. You can see that adding insulation only increases the STC rating by 3 decibels. Adding a second layer of drywall on each side increases the STC rating by 6 decibels, and adding a second framed wall increases the STC rating by 9 decibels. Now, insulation does absorb some sound, and we use it in acoustic treatment because that's the best solution for that problem. But in that situation, we're taking advantage of sound traveling through the absorber twice. Once when it first passes through the insulation, and second when it bounces off the wall and goes back through. When we're trying to isolate a room, insulation isn't what you want. You want mass. Imagine how much insulation it would take to achieve an STC rating of 63. That would be one gigantic wall. The purpose of adding insulation in wood-framed walls is as a damping material. It's pushed up against the wood studs and the drywall, reducing the amount of vibration that occurs. Some of the sound waves pass through the drywall, some of the sound waves bounce back, and some of the sound waves are converted into vibrations. The insulation helps to dampen the vibrations in the same way that a drum head will vibrate less when you add an O-ring or similar material. The insulation also absorbs any sound that bounces between the walls in the same way that it does in acoustic treatment like I described earlier. Sound waves can bounce back and forth in the space between the drywall, and they will be reduced each time they pass through the insulation. This is important to understand when discussing what insulation is best for soundproofing, because it has nothing to do with how much sound is absorbed by the insulation. In general, any insulation will do. They can all act as a damping material. The reason I chose to use rock wall is actually because of mice. I will spare you the details, but we bought this house 2 years ago knowing there was a significant mice issue. We had exterminators at our house for 2 full days, filling holes and removing all the old insulation from the basement. They recommended rock wall because mice don't like it. Mice love fiberglass. So that made the decision really easy for the exterior walls. For the insulation in the ceiling, I would probably do it differently if I did it again. You can get fiberglass insulation that's as thick as the gap between the floor joists, and this is what I would recommend. I was sticking to the anti-mice strategy, but rock wool bats don't fill the whole cavity and might fall down over time. Fiberglass insulation is also much easier to stuff into awkward corners around HVAC and plumbing, etc. With rock wool, you have to carefully cut it and fit it. This makes it stay in place really well in wood stud framing, but it's a drawback for less predictable places. In summary, don't stress about what insulation you use. Pick whatever will be easiest for you to find in your area, and you won't lose any performance by going with the cheapest option. You may have noticed at the start of the video that the most effective way to increase sound isolation is with a double stud wall. It creates more isolation than adding a second layer of drywall. Keep in mind that STC ratings don't cover frequencies below 125 Hz, which are the hardest to absorb. This is where the added mass of multiple layers of drywall really helps. But I'll come back to the issue of decoupling in future videos about drywall and my ceiling because I haven't been impressed with resilient channels. I'm getting a fair bit of impact noise coming through the ceiling, and I've already made plans to rebuild it with isolation clips from the same company that made the clips I used for the walls. Subscribe to be notified when those videos come out, and hit like if you found this video helpful.